Let me just say again, a reminder again, for people on YouTube later that the talk's dedicated to Jimmy Carter, his memory and his spirit. A guy who woke up and who also grew up. And, growing up doesn't mean living to be 100. A lot of people live and die at 103 and they're totally like children still. No, Jimmy both woke up and grew up, and that's our theme for today. What we're going to explore. Now, this is going to be I'm going to do my best. I actually have a timer set so I can watch my own time because I've got a lot to say today. It's a big thing to talk about how to go from this broken world to a world of wholeheartedness, and that's sort of finding this path. And I have the timer set for like 40 minutes, which will give me still 5 minutes to sort of wrap it up. And the notes will be very helpful today. And most of you, I have your emails, and I know who's here, so I'll be sending them out to you because I'm not going to be able to talk about everything that I have on my notes, not in this amount of time. And so, first of all, it's an overview of what happens if you can integrate waking up, which we've been working on, and growing up. And growing up is the thing that most people, we know about physical growing up, but we don't really know about the stages of growth that humans go through. As a matter of fact, three of the people that I got to credit, I've been reading 3 books together for the last month and a half about. And William James was a psychologist at Harvard in the beginning, 1905. He's given lectures at Harvard. He's the first psychologist that, first of all, thought that spiritual experiences were important. And he was the first guy who was really talking about psychology and the title of a book that collects these lectures, The Varieties of Religious Experience. And so I've been reading that. Reading Huston Smith. So you might know Huston Smith from the Religions of Man, and later he called it Religions of the World. If you had a world religions class, you might have had that book. But Huston Smith is somebody I've been reading because he's especially a book called Forgotten Truth. And I'll have all this on the notes so you don't have to really take a lot of this stuff down. Just maybe write something if it really resonates. And the forgotten truth is that we're more than stuff. Science brought in the idea of how to measure stuff, distance, time, and space. But the view that we're just matter, and that when we die, nothing else happens. Well, that's a very sort of degraded view of a human being. We are matter. We are stardust. And we are also, we have a body, which is a dance. All this matter is an incredible dance. When you die physically, that dance stops. You get rigor mortis. But right now, everything is moving. Neurons are firing, etc. Blood, fluid, it's all moving. It's all dancing. And so we are matter. We are a body. Okay, we have a mind. We have a brain, of course, but the mind and the brain are not the same. And this is where you get into the connection between science and spirituality. When Suzuki Roshi talked about big mind, he wasn't talking about having a big brain. The mind is something different than the brain. The brain is what makes the mind possible, of course. But whoops. Yeah. The brain is matter, but it's also, it's an interface. And so these thoughts we have, the creations, the paintings, the art, all that's not physical. It comes from a dance. And then finally, Ken Wilber, who So William James, Houston Smith, and Ken Wilber. I've been reading Wilber for 40 years, and he really was the first guy, I guess it was 84, that I read who talked about this vertical stages of inner growth. He really put them together. There's a dozen or so people who talk about that now, but Wilbur's the guy that I read. So I've been mixing these three together and trying, and that's behind this talk. Well, the path from broken to wholehearted. Well, what is the brokenness? And just to name it quickly, because I think we all know it. The divided states of America, richest uh, country ever. We have 40 million Americans who are food insecure, many who are dwelling insecure. We had opioid crisis. So many of our young kids are dying from that. The culture wars that are going on, social media, which is full of nastiness and disinformation on the downside. Women's rights have been contracted. First time in our experience in this country when we actually took away rights, uh, reproductive rights for women, and human rights are under attack. That covers everybody. Uh, we got. I'm just pointing it out, just so we're putting it up, just to see what we're trying to heal. War is now cool again. Starting with Ukraine. Genocide is in front of our eyes. Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, 100 million refugees fleeing armed violence and the climate catastrophe. You gotta move if you can't raise food, if you can't feed yourself. Much of Africa, so sub-Saharan Africa, is moving to try to get to Europe just to survive. Well, human beings have always emigrated. It's actually one of in the Declaration of Human Rights. Emigration is a human right because it's always happened. And then the whole planetary reset, the climate catastrophes. Currently, it's LA, but it'll be someplace else. So that gives you a picture of the stuff that and government doesn't seem to be working anywhere. We're going back 100 years after the fact. We're going back. Fascism is on the rise. That whole idea of authoritarianism is speaking to all over Europe and in the United States. And Mussolini 100 years ago came to power. He was the first. He made up the term fascista, and we are Homo amnesians. We forget what that was all about and what that led to. World War II, and so there's all that. Then there's the paradox of religion itself, because we're a spiritual group here, we're an interspiritual group. We're no strict religion here. That's different than spirituality. But the paradox of religion, because most people on the planet are religious, and so the paradox of religion is important to look at. Here's the paradox. Since the great religions were formed, and that's in the last 6,000 years, when we've been here 300,000 years, so that's pretty recent. But when the great religions were formed, they have been the source of both the greatest hatred, torture, and warfare that we've experienced on the planet. Uh, Crusades, you name it, jihads. So on one hand, there's the religions have led to religious wars and torture, burning people at the stake, bombings, the whole bit. And also, religions have been the greatest source of love and compassion and care. It's this paradox. So when you throw out religion, you're throwing out both. And so, but religion is this paradoxical thing, and we're trying to understand that. Um, Most millennials, uh, like my daughter Elizabeth, they say there's 70% say they're spiritual and not religious. We got to grapple with that. And then there's the whole science versus religion thing. Okay, uh, artificial intelligence, anti-vaxxers, religious versus spiritual versus atheism. There's a lot of stuff that's like there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of doubt, and a lot of darkness too comes out of it. What gives me the hope amidst all this darkness? The same with the Dalai Lama. The Tibetans see this as a dark age. but they don't lose hope, and I don't lose hope either. The good news is evolution of consciousness is on our side. It's achingly slow work. I mean, we live for hundreds of thousands of years at the same level, and we're going to look at those stages of consciousness. But it's really speeding up. You can't notice it because you're in it, of course, but science shows us, and the people who have studied this growing up things that, it was till 1800s or 1700s to 18th century before we realized, well, we shouldn't have slaves. And that was a stage of consciousness we'll look at. But they said, no, it's not right for a human being to make a slave of another human being. I mean, the church had slaves, Indians, Native Americans in this country had slaves. Slavery was in because level of consciousness said these other people, they can work for free. But somehow that came. And it was only 100 years ago where psychology actually emerged in the early 20th century. Freud, Jung, and then people who could actually discover these stages of waking up and uh, how much they affected everything that's going on. So I'm going to put the screensaver up here now for a minute. What you might have seen coming in for people on YouTube, especially, but for all of us. Uh, if I can, it's always a little tricky to move this stuff around. Here's the screensaver we started with, and I'll leave it up for a little bit so that those of you just popping in or on YouTube uh, can see it. It's sort of might be a, a puzzling screensaver. It should be. But this image to the left, it's called the three-dimensional cross or a six-armed cross, and it is an integral image. You see the four lateral arms of the cross. It's like a horizontal level, and that really represents waking up. And I'm looking down the middle of my room here at Lucy Powell, and I have a mandala there. And it's the shape of a mandala, and it's the shape, a horizontal layout of the universe is what a mandala is. It always has four directions, and then something important in the center, the fifth, you see. And Asian religions, especially the Tibetans, they really are keen on this. They go around with their little things, and they take 2 weeks to make this mandala out of colored sand, and then in the center, of course, is the Buddha, of course. But that's a kind of it's always a view of how you wake up and the dimensions of wakefulness, and it's a horizontal thing, and that's throughout Asia. Angkor Wat, is laid out in this dimension of the four corners. And even if you read the Bible, the Old Testament, Eden, there was a tree. The tree of life was the center, and there were four rivers coming in right at that point. It's the symbolism of that's there, and really even in the Middle Eastern cultures too. So that's one level, and that deals with space and time, and that's important. And we're going to go through the five uh, states of wakefulness, of waking up. These are states. And now the vertical thing, the vertical line, is levels of reality, and reality changes depending on the stage of consciousness you're at. A stage is different than a state. A stage is more permanent. You can be in one stage of consciousness for your whole life and not go to, this is it's vertical because as you go from stage to stage, you increase your capacity to see reality. There's more room. You become a bigger container as you go up. And there's about a dozen people who have put out their ideas of these stages of consciousness in the 20th century, and they're anywhere from 8 to 12 stages. I'm going to collapse it into four. Uh, just to make it easier to look at. And if you really want to explore the sub stages and stuff, you could. There's a number of people you could read. Read Wilbur if you want. He he. I read his Up from Eden in 1984. It was his second book, and he had 12 stages. And he talks about it in terms of fours. Now it's easier to understand. So those two things, that image is an integral image of uh, waking up integrated with growing up. We talk about growing up, but we think it just means we're a little baby and now you're 6'2" or whatever, or you're older or whatever. No, because a lot of old people who are heads of countries are children. It just strikes you. They're ridiculous. They're not grown up at all. They're not elders. Yeah. See, so we're going to have to explore this now. And again, all this will be in the notes, including the image. So I'll be sending it to you if you want it. Uh, now, the thing to understand here. Now, this is key. Waking up again was a kind of horizontal dimension, and then growing up is a vertical dimension. And when you integrate spirituality, which is this thing that's been around for a long time, probably 30,000 years ago, shamans started waking up. We weren't even have towns or cities or anything. Shamans were with tribes, and they had these experiences. And we know all over all the continents on the planet that they went into caves or secluded places and took information that they woke up to and for the first time put it on the cave wall. 30,000 years ago. We'd live 270,000 years more or less as Homo amnesians, Homo sapiens. But then, so it took a long time before anybody ever really had some kind of inner waking up experience and put it on the cave wall. Yeah. So that's, there's integrating spirituality, and then psychology. It was nowhere around really until the early 20th century. So that's 100 years ago. That's really new. And how if you can integrate the spirituality, the understanding of the direct experience of the spirit with psychology, you're making you're creating a terrific capacity for everything. You're becoming a much bigger container. Okay. And our stage of growing up, which I'm going to talk about second, I'm going to first talk about the conscious, waking up. That's 5 states of waking up. But uh, growing up is the missing piece. You might have some sense of the states of consciousness that we talk about being woke, what the Buddha was an emblem of, but how that interfaces what growing up does for that is it's going to be a revelation. Well, let's talk about the 5 states of waking up. Now, one way to think of these, again on the horizontal, is like widening rings. Like think of throwing a pebble into a still pond and then boom, widens out. So there's a sense of there's more room as think of these 5 rings more or less, uh, and then you got more a sense of what it really means to be at the 4th and 5th level state of waking up. And you may have experienced all of these states. Most of us have experienced, well, all of us have experienced the first 3 states. Okay. Now the first state, and you don't have to write all this down if you're going to get the notes. Just maybe just a jot, the main thing. But I'm just going to fill it out a little bit. And this is an overview. So like we're going to talk much more in depth on all of these states and stages in the next thing because I think we need to have deeper information. The first state of consciousness is what is called the gross state. Not like oh gross. No, it just means the material. Just the baseline, and that's a kind of the state we all know. It's this egoic, separate self state that you feel like all right, I'm here and everything else is out there. And when you start doing meditation practice, boy, then you really see what it is, because that's, we talk about the monkey mind, the mind that's it's all over the place. You don't really understand the monkey mind until you've at least sat one time, uh, and just tried to just be there, and then how the thoughts, go swing from tree to tree. A tree full of 100 monkeys. That's how it is sometimes. And mostly, this we all know this. We grow up with this, uh, and um, as you get to be older, and not it doesn't take too long that it's sort of cramped. It's sort of tight state of being, and the Buddhists say, and I think rightly so, that all the suffering comes from this state of consciousness when you're in this thing, and there is a kind of notice when you're in a situation and all of a sudden you tighten up a little bit. There's fear there. This is a state that comes out of fear because we're born and we're cut off from our mother. We can't even turn over, we can't do anything, can't feed ourselves. And so it's a lot of fear in this. And we do feel separate. We don't feel united with the universe. And mom's over there and I'm hungry. And how can I get her? All that stuff. And, but this state of consciousness comes and goes. When you get fed, well, then everything is mellow and you feel one again, So states, again, they come and go, but we all know this state. We all know this tightening up of the body when a situation occurs. Well, then we're going right into gross state of consciousness. Now, we've all experienced the subtle state, or the second thing, which is called the subtle state. Subtle state is what we have when we have dreaming at night. And we're starting to get the sense of the soul. The Greeks used to say, it was called psyche, the soul for the Greeks. And they said, well, when you fall asleep and you dream, all your soul parts come out and dance and do all these crazy dreams like we have, they come out to play. And then when we wake up, they all go back, they all go back. But it's a sense of that there's more than just this monkey mind. There's more than just this thinking, trying to survive. There is, and we all experience that in dreams, and perhaps that's what the level of the shamans were putting in there. They were actually putting their dreams, the dream of the hunt, and then they might have been ingesting different plants too. Indigenous guys along the way. They found out if you eat certain things, you have dreams while you're awake. You're flying and all this. The shamans and Central America, especially. And maybe this is where the idea of a deity comes in. Definitely, these things that appear to you that seem to have power. So we all know what that state's like. Uh, there's such a thing as daydreaming too, which some of us are masters at, and it's pleasant. Yeah, but it's a little more subtle. It's not so gross because you're actually getting into soul territory when you're dreaming. Now, the third state is what they call causal, and that's deep dreamless sleep, where you sleep and the guys are measuring, in your sleep study, they're measuring when you're dreaming, but then it actually goes blank and there's no activity. This is the third level, this deep dreamless sleep. And really where the soul is really plugged into the spirit at this time, and it's sort of formless. This the Buddhists are talking about emptiness. Um, this is what they're talking about, where there's no activity whatsoever, and in a good night's sleep, when you really wake up refreshed, you're probably plugged into the spirit, the formless, and you don't remember anything, but you wake up, you feel a little more refreshed. Because it takes energy to dream. Sometimes you wake up screaming, if it's a nightmare. So this is another level of consciousness, though. Although 2 and 3 are when you're actually unconscious to a certain extent. Your eyes aren't open. You're in bed or wherever. So we know all those 3. Now what we're training in is the fourth kind of state of consciousness, which you could call the witness. It's got, there's other names, the Hindus call this Turiya, and there are other names, but the witness, and that's what we're training in when we go into formal meditation, the witness. And the witness is it's a kind of I amness. You know, our culture tells us I think, therefore I am. But when you go into this state of consciousness, thinking is dropped and you're just here. That's why I say, uh, you make being, you're just yourself, your being, the master, and the thinking is the servant. So we're flipping things around when you try and this is what we're training in, and it's what we'll train in when we go back uh, to practice meditation again. And really, the highest form is objectless meditation, shikantaza in Zen, uh, Mahamudra in Tibetan Buddhism, and then if you do centering prayer, which is my favorite mode, it's really objectless meditation. There's no object. You're just, here I am. You're a witness. And you don't focus on anything really. You just are it's more of a big picture. Okay. And when you do grab an object, a thought, and anything you grab and start looking at and thinking about, well, then you're back in the objective world. You're hooked onto an object in centering prayer, whether you let that go. You return to the center, which is just being here, just being here. Yeah. Now, when you really get the knack of this in whatever mode you're doing it, there's a kind of feeling of freedom here because you're letting go of you're turning the blender off, and you can actually experience something new. These are all levels of experience, you see. States of consciousness are about what you experience. Even in deep, dreamless sleep, you're experiencing a sense of emptiness and formlessness. But in the witness, which we're training in now, you can train in these states. You're not focused on an object or a goal or anything. You're just being here. For me, here now, after all these years, and especially Buddhist training, when I sat this morning, I keep my eyes open. And to come to this Zendo will be very interesting if you've never been here, because I've got windows here that are actually, I see what's going on the ground. And then there's windows up high that I can see what's going up in the sky and the trees out there. And then there's just my altar and all that. And I like to take off my glasses lately and just be aware of it. You're just being with it, and you are getting kind of you're not trying to do anything. It's outside. It's been like O'Hare Airport of birds going around trying to find bird seed and stuff. And I noticed that. I'm aware of it, but I'm not thinking about, not fascinating on it. Not fixing on it. And we're training on that. Okay, that's what we do. You can train in now. Now, if you train in that long enough, at some point, and the Buddhists and the Hindus have a different word for it, but in the Christian parlance, grace comes in. If you practice this state enough, grace comes in, and then somehow you jump to the fifth state, which you could call the one taste. This is this oneness that people are talking about, but it's an idea for most people. But when grace comes in, you have these feelings of oneness, and probably maybe 60% of us have had this one time or another, or maybe several times, walking in nature, maybe in meditation. I played one basketball game. This is what they call in sports being in the zone. It was one basketball game where I knew I couldn't miss, and I shot a lot where normally I didn't. I was just in the zone. There was no thinking. There was just playing. So you can experience it in a number of different things, but in meditation, and really even in basketball, there's something that, you can go so far as to be a witness. If you're playing the sports, you're really trying to be aware of everything. Who's basketball, the man you're guarding or the hoop and all that stuff. But this deep sense of not only freedom, but now fullness comes in with the one taste. And these states come and go. That's why they don't last. I mean, that's what states are. Nothing wrong with that. But it's almost like when Merton was, I had Merton with the screensaver, and he had that wheel leaning up against the cross, which was for him his way of integrating uh, uh, Asia and Christianity, you see. But he wanted to go around and take pictures. He was a contemplative photographer, and he'd just take ordinary things, and he'd he'd see something bigger than that, and that's where grace comes in. So you can't practice one taste; you can only point it out. But if you meditate long enough, uh, grace comes into it, and you get flashes of this oneness if you're lucky. Okay, so our stage of these are the 5 stages, and we're going to go through them a little bit more thoroughly in the next talk, where we'll just focus on those. But for now, that's good. Our stage of growing up will tend to determine how we think and feel about everything else. So, in this sense, when you have a state of oneness, let's say you have this one taste experience, uh, the stage you're at can interpret it very differently. Now, I'll use an example of this. Most of you know Ram Dass, who's graduated from this realm, but he was a guy who wrote "Be Here Now," and who was in the Advaita Hindu line, and he started as a Harvard psychologist, just like William James, and he and Timothy Leary got together and started doing experiments with psilocybin, and he got fired, and then he just he had these one taste experiences. You can have them using mushrooms or strong psychedelics. You're one with everything, but then it fades. It's a state, you see, but that's fine. Now, so he had those one taste experiences. Well, his brother uh, also had a one taste experience, but he was in a mental institution, and his view was, I'm Jesus and you're not, which is David Koresh's view, and the guy who killed John Lennon. He was John Lennon, and the real John Lennon was an imposter. I'm John Lennon, and even John Lennon was not. So and these guys were at the first stage of consciousness, which we'll talk about. Ram Dass had the same experience of the oneness, and it was much more spacious. I have full trust that Jesus thought everybody had this same consciousness. He wasn't special. We put him on a podium. We put the Buddha on a podium, Allah, and all that stuff. But there's a much more space depending on your stage. Now, here are the 4 stages of consciousness, and this is a kind of vertical thing. Each of these is a little bit more whole and can include a little bit more. Now, the first stage, egocentric, that speaks for itself. It's sort of selfish, sort of narcissistic. This is how we are as kids, as infants. We gotta cry. We gotta get mom to feed us. It's impulsive. Egocentricity is impulsive. It's aggressive, and it's kind of the way it worked out. It was kind of tribal, and it believed in magic. Little kids will cover their eyes, and they think now magically you can't see them. You see, you can't see them because they're covering their eyes. So it's a very limited form of consciousness, and it's easy to be, whatever stage you're living in. If things happen that are traumatic, you can drop back a stage or 2 even. But this is the early stage of infancy. And it's all about me. All right, so get that. I'll give you four words that you can associate with the 4 stages. And the first one, it's about me. And you can be very much older, people in your 70s and being head of countries, but it's all about me. You might know people like that. No leaders like that. Okay, so that's the first thing, and we all start there, but the people who are 70 years old and are still there, that becomes a problem, especially when they got they have power. The magic, the tribal thing it's just part of growing up. You're with your family, you're with your folks. I'm wearing my tribal kind of colors are red and gold for Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame, I lived there for 4 years. It was a great place. I read the great books there. I feel close to it. It's my tribe. I'll be rooting for Notre Dame when they play the Buckeyes of Ohio State, but I don't want to kill the other guys. And, it's a game that's, sports is mostly tribal. It is my tribal fix when I watch Notre Dame playing sports. I'm not much interested in all the other professional stuff. And so we all have this tribal part of us, and it's not all bad, you know, but the magical thinking that goes with it is devastating. If you remember, COVID was going to go poof in the summer magically, you know. So that's egocentric kind of stage of consciousness. It's all about me, the leader, you know. Now, the second one is ethnocentric. That's it's about the group and the community you're in, the tribe. If you really, it shades up to where the group is more important than me myself, and that's probably 60 to 70% of the people on the planet are in this stage. That's what I'm going to vote Republican just because these are my guys, and the dangerous thing about the group, ethnocentric, and ethno means, your ethnic group, is it's us versus them, is the mentality. There's always another. There's always a them, okay? And it leads to war.
Jared Sarantinello.
It leads to a war. That's my son. He's not silenced, but I got to turn this down. Excuse me. So it leads to war. Those are the wars we talked about: religious wars, ethnic wars. Okay, and it's an authoritarian kind of thing. So the leader emerges, and the leader is the power. It's kind of mythic too. We'll talk about it, all the myths, etc. But now it is actually a larger. There's something more than me. The tribe is important. The group is important. The party is important. The country is important. That's where nationalism comes in. America first, make America great, the hell with everybody else. And, Germans did that too. And, French do, nation states, it can be big, but it's the same kind of thinking. Okay. And there's more on this, but this is probably the majority of people, adults, are in this level of thought. And so we're moving from me to us, so it's bigger. Okay, now the third level is world centric. So we got egocentric, ethnocentric, world centric. And that is where people aren't just worried about their own ethnic group, their own families, their own country, but they're worried about everybody. Fairness for all. Human rights comes in at this. Human rights didn't really start until the 18th century. Okay. And reason and facts and law means something in this level. And reason is, comes in the 18th century. It's the age of reason. So reason, facts, law make a difference. Where important, it's magic or the myth is important. And that's why there's so many people attacking the law now, because these are people on an ethnocentric level. Oh, we don't need laws. We don't need regulations. Facts, they're not going to fact check on Meta anymore, But the world-centric thing, probably 10 to 20% in the world are world-centric, which is a lot, but not compared to the 60 to 70%. But it is sort of since the 18th century, it is the growing cultural center, the center of gravity of modernity, reason, facts, science, law. It's all under, it's all being questioned now. And people say we don't need any of it. Now the fourth stage, 5 to 10% people are in this stage, is what is called holistic and integral. This stage transcends the three lower stages and includes what's healthy about them. So transcends and includes. And now the integral stage is all the, it has more space than all the other ones. Each one gets more spacious. There's more room for everything, you see. Uh, now, the thing that's comes in the integral stage too is a kind of understanding of spirit, which of course it doesn't mean you become irrational. It becomes you become transrational. There's more than just reason and facts. There's something else. And also, this is key, I think, especially a woman like Carol Gilligan, who has these 12 steps. She said, this is where you actually integrate yin and yang. You integrate the feminine aspects and the masculine aspects, the energies. We're not talking about you know, uh, uh, women and men so much as these feminine and masculine energies. Yin compassion, yang compassion. Yin compassion is what we call love and putting your arms around somebody, and that's all great. But then there's yang compassion, which is tough love. I could tell you some stories about that. And I think that was what's to me was so outstanding about Jesus, as we know his life. He not only allowed women to eat at the table and be disciples of full value, something that the Catholic Church sadly has not come to. They totally perverted that. Women are second-class citizens. We're seeing that in our own politics and where the church stands. But no, women were, and he actually integrated both the feminine and the fully integrated feminine and masculine, I believe, in himself. You look at his parables, the father of the prodigal son. He's not like any Jewish father that anybody could recognize. Uh, he gives his son the patrimony. No, no, you get a big slap if you ask for it from a Jewish father at that time. He gave him all his patrimony, and he went and blew it all, whored and drunk and whatever. And when he came back, the father ran to him and put his arms around him and said, "I'm going to throw a party. You're back. You were dead to me. Now you're alive." I was related to the good son myself. Oh, hell, I'm working my ass off for you. You never threw me a party. He said, "No, you can come in too." Yeah, he's back. He was dead now. And that's more like a yin compassion, you see, just the same way as the parable of the Good Samaritan. He was an enemy, but he had this compassion, see. So the parables show a different view. It shows the integration of kind of, turn the other cheek. All these things, very interesting. So we're going to spend some time on each of those stages, a talk on each of those stages, but those details are down in the notes. Now, look at the United States. There's 340 million of us, pretty much. The leading edge of evolution, this is why, you got to look at this evolutionary. The leading edge of evolution is not the ethnocentric. Uh, it's the holistic integral. It's people who are interested in just what we're doing. And that means there might be 17 to 34 million of us who are actually doing this kind of work. Now, the center of gravity would be in culture, in the arts, in government, in terms of the Constitution and law and all that stuff. The center of gravity would be in uh, the uh, uh, the third level, which is reason, world centric. The people who believe in human rights, the people who believe everybody deserve, we the people, it was in the fire. We're trying to grow into that still. That's really the center of gravity. The edge would be people who are doing this kind of work. And when you put those two together, that's where we're going. That's the sense of uh, that's a sense of hope that I get because I can see where the edge is and what will transform this. But it's not instant. Not one election is going to do it. So let me boil this down to 20 words uh, or less. And this poem is in the notes, and it'll be on Monday out to 1,000 people, whoever will read my Monday thing. I just call it a sacred path. So this will boil all these words down, which is probably about 750 words, yak, 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 into 20 words or less. And this is, I think, what is important to see about this path. If you're coming to this already, you're looking for a sacred path. That's the title of this poem. A growing freedom from anxiety ripens into the capacity for the fullness of love. So there's some key words here. A growing, and growing, it has to do with those stages now. Growing up, a growing freedom. You start to feel a growing freedom, a sense of joy in the work itself, a growing freedom from anxiety. Who doesn't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the anxiety? It's not so much like panic or fear, which you might have if your house starts burning up, with a wildfire. But we're living with this low level of anxiety that keeps us sort of worried about things. A growing freedom from anxiety ripens into the capacity. And these stages show you have a larger capacity. You become a bigger container. Ripens into the capacity for the fullness of love. Yeah, I think that's a good way to end here. That image, and it'll be in the notes. It'll be Monday morning. That's the poem that's coming out. A growing freedom from anxiety ripens, and ripening takes time. I've been doing this over 50 years now. Uh, and we have a lot of incarnations, but if this seed gets planted, I want to wake up and grow up, ripening uh, into the capacity for the fullness, the feeling of fullness of love. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's good enough, John.